Today's session is how to build a cloud, technologies, pitfalls, and challenges. And we've picked this group because they know something about both building hosting platforms and cloud platforms themselves, having been operators, and now many of them have turned to sort of the dark side on the vendor community. We do have still one clean slate over here, fortunately, who've gone through a lot of the challenges, pitfalls, and successes that they'd like to share. And I thought we'd have a healthy debate amongst everyone on stage here. But with that being said, nothing's more valuable than getting your input and your questions. So by all means, we're going to try to leave time at the end for the questions, but I would love to see questions even from the get-go, because it'll set the trend for whatever you truly want to get out of the session and what you want to know from everybody. So with that being said, I'm going to allow everybody to introduce themselves, starting on my right with Martin.
I'm Martin Leclerc, co-founder of iWeb. iWeb is a dedicated server provider that was started as a shared hosting provider and now is more into unmanaged, dedicated, and managed, and that just started to work with OpenStack, and that had experience with a lot of other orchestrators and cloud technologies, and that also we also built our own orchestrator before we started working with OpenStack.
Okay, thank you. Tony.
I'm Tony Lucas, founder and VP of product for Flexient. Flexient has a software solution to allow hosting companies and service providers to build their own cloud platforms. The claim to fame, if you will, is we built the world's second infrastructure as a service platform back in 2007. When as part of the hosting company I ran for 12 years, and we decided to take all the knowledge and skills we built in doing that and help you guys build your own cloud platforms.
Hello, my name is Rob Hirschfeld. I'm an OpenStack Foundation board member. I'm one of the elected individual representatives of on the board. And I'm also a Dell Distinguished Engineer and the lead technologist for our OpenStack solutions, and actually several other cloud platforms that are in my company's hyperscale wheelhouse. So a lot of experience helping customers bring up clouds, helping build open source communities around cloud infrastructure, and what it takes to really make something that people can use and leverage in their business.
Thanks a lot.
Cool, my name is Ryan Jones. I'm with Microsoft. I work in our server and tools group, and my team is responsible for the web workload that we ship out of Microsoft. So we ship this into Windows Server with IIS. We ship this into Windows Azure as Windows Azure websites, and we ship this into the hosted and private cloud through the Windows Azure pack.
Cool. Yeah, so my name is Dido Bredal. I'm the founder and CEO of OnApp. OnApp is a software stack that helps hosting companies, service providers, telcos build out cloud, CDN, and storage solutions. We've got around 30% market share and around 2,000 deployments.
Thank you. And my name is Antonio Pirano. I'm the CTO of Science Logic. We're a monitoring and management technology software that gets deployed in the data center in your host environment. So as you can see, we've got a very heavy group of people that sit right in the midst of, I think, your cloud stack, so to speak, that have great visibility into the building blocks of these modern day clouds. So to start with, Ditlev, what is a cloud? No, I'm completely kidding. I'm completely kidding. We don't want to go down that 20-minute path. So let's see. The very first question I'm going to start with is Tony. Surprise, surprise.
What is
Tony,
cloud?
why is it that you think hosters are taking a beating these days?
Well, I think there's a variety of reasons, but the biggest one that we've actually seen is, and I don't mean to beat hosters up even more, but being a little too complacent about the services their customers are actually wanting, and not realizing that the customers' needs are changing. Massive enterprise and SME IT being moved out to deliver on cloud services, and service providers just not reacting to it. And their customers going elsewhere, going off to Amazon, going off to whoever else that can actually deliver the services. I was talking to the CEO of a hosting company just yesterday in the expo hall, and he says, yeah, all my customers care about is that their websites load fast and their email gets delivered quickly. And that's all I care about. And that's one of the biggest issues, I think, is just not realizing that cloud is a horrible word, it's a marketing buzzword, it's everything else, but there is actually substance behind it that people need to actually react to and get on with delivering.
Okay, and by the way, the reason I'm asking this question and making the assumption that there is a bit of a beating is because we have seen some numbers reduced greatly over the last couple of years in the shared hosting for sure and dedicated hosting sectors. And I think, my question is really starting at the top. What are the big drivers for why you would even be interested in building a cloud? So I'm trying to start with the business level. So Ditlev, why is it, do you think they're taking a beating? Is it because they've been under pressure from the big guys? Is it just the global economy? That's the way it is? Is the pie shrinking? What is the problem?
So I think most of the hosters really have been sleeping in class. I think they've for some reason allowed this bookshop to come in and take the greatest commercial opportunity of our industry, which is cloud. The rest of the industry is growing like 5 to 15% a year, and cloud is growing 70 to 80 to 100% a year. And yet, more than half of that growth sits in Amazon. And I think it's like that we've been tied into these old business models. We've been focusing on the same things. We've totally, among the people in this room, commoditized our service. I mean, hosting is a terrible thing to sell when you think about it. Domain names, if you buy Dilo.com from UK2 Group, my old business, or GoDaddy, it's exactly the same domain name. And you can actually go up in the stack or go down or where you look at it. And look at shared hosting to the same situation. A shared hosting account is pretty much the same thing no matter where you go. So if I went to any of you guys and asked, so how's your hosting? You say it's really good. If I said, how's your uptime? It's superb. How's your support? It's excellent. And you know what? Every single one of you will say the same thing. And that's the problem. You totally commoditize yourself. You need to start looking at things that actually pull you out of this transparency. Because in a commoditized world, you have two levers. You have your price lever, you can lower your cost. Or you have your marketing lever, you can increase your marketing cost. Both of those cases is a race for the bottom and you're slowly killing yourself. Might be pushing it a little bit there. But those of you who are not focusing on product development, but just solely focusing on the marketing and the price, which unfortunately is most of the industry, are sort of screwed right now.
So let me ask somebody in the real world for a second. What was your driver at iWeb? I mean, you obviously took a point at which you said, you know what, we have to evolve and modernize something. What was the driver?
I think seeing growth slow down.
So you decided you needed an edge, you needed to get back into the market rapidly, and you've had great growth, right? So.
And looking at the environment and the new players and things like Amazon and what's going on, but I think one of the things that makes it, that we are in the situation we are seeing now is that I think that as hosters we're kind of slow in terms of technologies, and if we look at what Amazon is at today or OpenStack and the number of features they have, the speed at what they are evolving and adding features, and I think a lot of us want to build everything first, and we are not going as fast as them, and it takes time to realize it, and when we realize it, maybe it's too late.
Right. So, but from an evolutionary perspective, and I'm going to give the guys in the middle a chance in a second too, but since we have the hoster right here, from an evolutionary perspective, I think, what became important to you pretty quickly?
Sure that giving the control to the user and making sure that looking at the evolution of virtualization and things like that, and seeing that customers need to interact with those technologies and need to have services developed that support those technologies.
But I mean, you had VPS services and
we were kind of slow with VPSs and cloud. We stick for a long time to I think it's important to have a focus, but at the same time, if you have too much focus, then you can miss what's happening before, and that's when you realize it, then you need to catch up. And when you have technologies like Amazon or OpenStack or an app that are around, and they already have an advantage.
Right, we'll get to the build versus buy question in a second. Let me give these two guys a second. Tony, go ahead.
I just wanted to say one quick thing is I actually don't think a lot of this is even Amazon's fault. I think it's Apple's fault. in that users have got very, very used to having a smartphone or other device where they can go, right, I want to do this thing, bang, 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 done. And it's there for them and it's ready for them. And they talk to their internal IT and they're then asked, right, well, that'll take you 3 weeks or whatever it is. And they go, well, hang on, how can I do all these things on my phone? And you can't even deliver me anything in 3 weeks or 3 months or whatever it might be. And I think that's one of the consumerization, the end user self-service, I think is one of the biggest drivers for a lot of this.
I think there is a consumerization and certainly commoditized features and functionality probably are the things that they want to consume rapidly, but there's other things that presumably don't. So let me turn to Rob and Ryan for a second here. So I guess from my perspective, what are the drivers, first and foremost, before we get into the nuts and bolts? Yeah. Do you think that where you saw commoditization that you wanted to, dare I use the word, eliminate from the task of building by the average hoster, where you suddenly realized, okay, this is the stuff that we can abstract away from them and let's get into the stuff that they really, really need. Is there a way in which to differentiate what's commoditized, as Ditlev says, and what isn't?
So there's a couple of, I don't know which, okay. Yeah, and there's a really interesting question around OpenStack and commoditization, because we've really, OpenStack is a collaborative open source project, and it's really differentiated from other open source cloud infrastructures because it's truly been built from the ground up as a multi-party collaboration where you actually have different companies that would normally be competitors working together to collaborate to build the shared infrastructure. So in a sense, you're agreeing to this commoditization. You could perceive it as agreeing to a commoditization. The challenge is, and some of this comes back to Amazon's presence in the market and what Amazon forces, is that, I'm going to jump all the way back to why hosters are feeling the squeeze, right? I can tell you from Dell's perspective and server volumes and sales and things like that, the amount of work and the amount of things being done in internet data centers and on the internet is going up, right? Going up exponentially and dramatically. There's no shortage of computational power being brought up and stood up online. The question is, how's it being monetized, right? Who's profiting from that? And so one of the things that we really see is that when people are doing that, they want to take their workloads and be able to move them around into different places, right? Amazon's done a really good job of capturing certain workloads and keeping it, and by offering a suite of services. And to compete with that, what we really want to be able to do is allow the people who are using those workloads to be able to change between, right? So then you can actually compete on your differentiated value, your no bullshit things, where if you have a specialty or a capability that's unique and special to you, you can bring in that customer because they're right for that. And if they want to then take that workload in-house, you could work with them in that. If they want to move to another host because they had a specialty that was better than yours or proximity, those become the differentiating factors. And so what we've really found is there's a real desire in the community, and it's not just OpenStack's community, but in the community in general, to be able to take customers and talk to them about their business cases and stop talking to them about which hypervisor they use or which API set they want to use and things like that. Those things we want to fade into the background, right? And so that's where people collaborate in OpenStack, is how do you build something that everybody can agree on so that individual companies can work on differentiation.
So Ryan, would you agree, what is the stuff that's fading into the background as quickly as possible that's commoditized, and where are the points of differentiation?
So I think we're at a point now where pretty much, I think, like you're saying, we don't need to talk about hypervisors anymore, right? Everybody in this room has virtualized compute. We're seeing major inroads into virtualization of storage and networking as well. And the thing is, those things do fade into the background, right? It becomes more important to focus on the finished services that people ultimately consume. And I think this can lead to a dangerous place where we end up in a debate about infrastructure services versus platform services. But at the end of the day, good example of platform services that are well known are my website or my email. But what about customer relationship management? What about ERP? What about outbound mail services, messaging services, these sorts of things? And the take that we look at is we are a platform company. We've always been a platform company. We built an OS many years ago that people then took and built applications on top of that. Today, what are we doing? We are building what we view as the data center OS, We run that in our own data centers. We invest billions of dollars in building the software, learning it, running it ourselves, and making sure that it works well for other people. With that as a building block, then hosting service providers, private cloud providers, ISVs, you can then build on top of that to build services that are unique to you. Because as soon as the thing that you're selling is the exact same thing that everyone else sitting next to you is selling, you're in a rough spot. I mean, I don't see how, and I come from hosting. I used to work for Maximum ASP. They were acquired by CBeyond, a telco. We had an IaaS solution, and when we released it, it was somewhat differentiated, and 18 months later, everybody else had the exact same thing. So what did that really buy us? We had a VM like that. We sold VMs. That was it, right? If that's the end game of this discussion, then I think that's going to be a challenging spot. It's really about the higher level services that people are ultimately delivering from the underlying infrastructure.
But there's a balance with this, which is that if you build a whole bunch of things that are custom and unique and only available for you, that while it might be not a discussion point, it also is perceived as a lock. And so one of the challenges here is that you have to come in with table stakes. If your table stakes lock you into somebody's platform, that will, in a lot of customers' eyes, erode your ability to provide them with business continuity, protection, or choice, or openness in the market. And so, while I completely agree with you, it isn't been a non-issue for customers. You actually do need to have a certain level of conformity so that customers feel like that they can take it off the radar.
I agree 100%.
At the end of the day, what you need is customers need to feel happily locked in. And that if you're offering a differentiated service, and they're happy to stick around and they know you've got unique capabilities and they're not going to worry about being able to move elsewhere. And that's exactly what Amazon's achieved to an incredible degree, because there's lots and lots of people that go, well, I couldn't move anywhere else if I wanted to because there's all these things that I now use at Amazon that nobody else is doing, or they're doing. Forget the fact that they're using a different API or whatever else. No one else is doing them at the scale that Amazon's got. And that is an issue. But the thing is, everyone can find a way to differentiate to let their customers be happily locked in.
So I don't disagree with any of you, and I think that differentiation we've established is absolutely the direction everyone needs to go. And I want to dive slightly a layer deeper and get into that actually the build topic for a second here, because I think we've established that everyone agrees, at least on this panel, that there's an element of commoditization at the hypervisor and below. So what next, right? Particularly for the average hoster, say a sub $25 million hoster. Ditlev, and I want to come back to the open architecture for a second there, because I think it's a very interesting discussion, because I think it has pros and cons. But let's go to Ditlev on this PaaS story, because
Thank you.
I would love to know from you, what on earth is this PaaS
What do you
thing?
think of
Why, as a
PaaS,
hoster,
actually?
would I go down the PaaS path? Isn't it good enough to just go down
There's
the
a story behind
infrastructure
this. We had a quick sort of 5 minutes catch up before this, and one of the things I said is, I don't get this PaaS stuff. I mean, why is everyone raving about it? But
I smelled
clearly-
weakness, and I had to go for it.
Exactly. Just no, but I think PaaS probably has some justification somewhere. But in general, what we're doing here, what this how to build a cloud discussion should be about, is how do you build abstraction layers between your, because that's how the whole thing started out. How did the initial data centers build an abstraction layer between the need for power and bandwidth? And that got commoditized. Then you build an abstraction layer between the data centers and the servers you put inside of them. And that was the infrastructure sitting in the data center. And then you slowly build more and more abstraction layers. And I think what the cloud is supposed to do, and what all the people on this panel are trying to do, is to help hosters to build abstraction layers between the services that their end users are requiring and the infrastructure below that is supplying it. And then the question is, well, is a part of that abstraction layer sitting in a PaaS layer? Is part of that abstraction layer sitting in the infrastructure layer? Is some of it even hardware still? God forbid, but some of it might actually be hardware. And in that case, it's about figuring all the pieces and put them together. And it's not about, I'm actually tired of these how to build a cloud discussion, because that's not what it's about. It's about how do you best build the full solution that your clients are requiring. In fact, I think if there's one thing we should get out of this, we should all sort of agree. We should stop talking about the cloud, because it's not helping us in any way. I think actually, as a term, if you asked the 100-something people here, what is the cloud, we'll probably get 200 different answers. And I think what we need to do is start focusing, just as you said, Rob, on the solutions we're trying to help, and the problems we're trying to help solve.
Well, so that's fine. I don't argue with you, but for lack of a better term, on the cloud side. Let's just call it the next evolution of your IT environment. Really, the final objective, let's face it, is to generate more revenue, right? And to keep yourself alive and keep yourself growing at the end of the day. I mean, my personal answer to that would have probably been more a commercial aspect, where I would have said, you know, from a building blocks perspective, if I'm going after a developer community, I probably want to start looking more and more like a PaaS. If I want to start going down, you know, a different path of going directly to SMBs or VARs that are selling into the SMB community that are not trying to develop customized apps, then I want to start, you know, really focusing much more on my portals and my differentiated services and maybe SaaS offerings. I think there is a difference. That's what I was getting at in terms of the building blocks themselves. How do you want to build as a hoster? I guess you got to know your market.
I just think, Antonio, the point is that these boxes should go away. The PaaS box, the IaaS box, and all the other boxes should just be taken away because it's not really relevant.
Well, the reality is that no customer comes along and says, I want IaaS, I want PaaS, I want SaaS. In their overall IT requirements, they want possibly one, possibly two, possibly all three of them in their overall IT. No one's going to go and think, okay, so I've got 3 domain names. Oh, right, so I'm going to go and boot a VM up on EC2 and run my own DNS server to look after DNS for 3 domain names. You're just not going to do it. And
well, that's
why there is this whole thing.
They don't define it in those boxes, but it helps us, right, from a building perspective. So whenever you start a framework for, you know, some sort of open stack deployment, you've got to start somewhere. And you sort of say, are we trying to build a framework by which people can start defining their own resources? Do we want a place where they just need to come and drop code? Do we need a place where they just want to use the application, stop annoying me with everything that's
so there's something really interesting that if you know, and I'm way down deep in OpenStack, but there's a phenomenon that's worth bubbling up so that people are aware of it. And before I got involved in OpenStack, we actually done a lot of research on what is a PaaS. And it's confusing because people look at compute, and when the thing that really makes a PaaS, in our research's opinion, is the services that you provide around it. Heroku's ability to scale up a load, linearly, it's okay, it's great, it's really fascinating. It sells a lot of OpenStack, or not OpenStack, Amazon storage and block and objects and things like databases and things like that. And so, you know, when you're looking at a PaaS, you're really talking about the services that are around that PaaS that you're enabling people to do, because those services are persistent. The storage in those services are persistent, and you're going to charge for them every month, whereas the compute might be elastic. What's happened in OpenStack is we started with these core projects around compute and storage, and really just compute and object. And what we found is that as those stabilized and matured, they allowed all these extra services to come in. And so there's this explosion of projects in OpenStack that say, all right, I want to do load balancer, I want to do database servers, I want to do firewalls, I want to do, I mean, it's amazing that the different options that people are bringing in as capabilities as effectively building out a platform, because platform as a service is a platform, once they have a stable core that they can innovate around. And that's really been the foundation for all these services.
But from a practical perspective, if I'm a hoster, Rob, don't I battle with making that decision? Where do I even start? I've only got so many resources, so many human beings that I can attach to this project right now. Where is my next step right now? Am I going to go whole hog into OpenStack? You know, I mean, to be frank, how difficult is this going to be? I don't even know what it provides me.
And I think that's one of the challenges for people at this conference, right? OpenStack today is a very vibrant developer community. We just passed 1,000 contributors to the code base. The number of projects is increasing. The benefits to coming are API and collaboration and not having to rewrite your own thing and be able to leverage all that innovation. The challenges are keeping up with the pace of change and things like that. Really it's going to end up being customer driven and what use cases you want to adopt. You don't have to pick everything that comes your way. You can pick and choose, start with core things.
One of the challenges, I'll say first of all, in general, although we can kind of compete with OpenStack, I'm a fan of the project. One of the challenges we find when we talk to service providers, though, is they say, okay, so I can take this OpenStack thing. How do I go to market? And it's not solving, right now, a lot of the problems on top of the platform. It's not doing some of the customer management, some of the multi-tenancy. I know it is a multi-tenant platform, but exposing it at the top level, those kind of issues. And you've got some companies that decide, you know what, I'm going to put the time and put the effort in to build it ourselves, like iWeb. And
you need to build something.
You can't do it with just the core product. And there's some companies...
Even with one app that's a complete product,
So what do you do? Are you saying that you now need to start looking at your hires? Do you need a more development type of community? I mean, your own DevOps team?
If you're going to build on something like...
Who should I be hiring? I mean,
if you're going to build on something on top of something like OpenStack, you do need a new skill set in doing that. And that's not that OpenStack is particularly hard or anything else. It's the fact that traditional hosting providers today don't have the skill sets, don't have the software developers. So the small ones that you were saying, the 0 to 25 million. There is exceptions. iWeb's an exception. DreamHost is an exception. There is people that are successfully doing it. But if you're, in general, there are a lot of skill sets. And we learned that from bitter experience. When we started off to build our own platform, this was pre-OpenStack, pre-everything. It was 2005 we wrote the first lines of code in our platform. And very quickly realized we needed to change skill sets to do it. We just didn't have the ones we thought we needed in-house.
So let me ask Martin, you've gone through some of this process yourself. What would you recommend to the average hoster here who wants to take the next step? Do I get a bunch of developers in, either professional services or in-house, start building like crazy, or do I sort of go the 50% route and go down OpenStack and then start to figure out what components I need? Or is it just easy to go buy Tony or Mr. Ditlev's product?
I think today you better build on something that exists, because those platforms are at the point that if you start from nothing and you want to go to the point that they are, it's an incredible investment. So you better use one of those platforms and build on it, because everyone was saying you need to differentiate, but so you can't go and, even if OnApp is a product that is quite complete and almost ready to use as in market. If everyone goes and install OnApp and add some sliders on its website, a lot of people does this, but you won't have any differentiator, and I don't think you'll have a lot of success. You need to take the platform or the orchestration solution as your base and differentiate on it and build something on top of it.
Is that the next layer? So if we assume everything below the hypervisor is commoditized, it's table stakes, is orchestration that next step? And do you even need it?
Virtual resource orchestration is already, maybe not technically commoditized, but I think we could all agree on the board that the one thing you shouldn't do is go and say, I can go and build something with Zen or KVM or everything else and a bunch of scripts, and I can do it better than everybody else has already done it. That battle's over. It is, in terms of, I can boot VMs up faster, I can create disks up, virtual disks faster, all that kind of stuff. It's done. It's that and up is, from there is where the game is now.
Or you can, with OpenStack, you can create your driver for some things and make things work differently, or I don't know, support like implement.
I think the question is where is the differentiation layer sitting?
Yeah.
And I think what we are seeing is that that's not a cool thing to say as a platform vendor, but it's not in the platform. It's in the stuff we put on top of it. So I think whether you guys would go with the OpenStack, the Cloud Stacks, or OnApp, for example, that's probably not going to. Some of these guys will bring you, or some of us will bring you faster to business than others, but it's not going to make a difference long term. The difference is what are you going to do with it, and what are you going to build on top of it, how are you going to package it, what perceived value you're going to put into it, how are you going to sell service on top of it that is not just tied to the same price or marketing levers that I spoke about before. And I think that's the real question, really.
Go ahead.
I think at Microsoft, the way that we look at it is first we look at things in terms of workload. So for example, inside of server and tools, we look at things such as like web. We look at things such as mobile. We look at things such as non-relational storage, relational storage, so on and so forth. And then digging into that more, you have to know your customers and you have to know the scenarios that you're looking to light up. So, we've all talked about, for example, how the web or how web hosting, as we've known it traditionally, is commoditized. But let's say that your customer is the enterprise, and let's say that the scenario that you're supporting is social media, or it is brand interaction. The usage patterns for that are drastically different than what could be supported by traditional web hosting services. And so providing things such as like global presence, traffic management, advanced diagnostics and monitoring, compliance for the enterprise. That's where you take a thing that's commoditized, you tune it for a customer, you tune it for a scenario, and all of a sudden the revenue that you can derive from that service is several orders of magnitude greater than what you can charge for the commodity service.
That's actually a very good point. I think it's very important not to silo yourself into this cloud platform, because at some stage the cloud will no longer be the cloud, it's just how stuff is done. Right. And at that stage, you need to be able to integrate with all the other services you're doing and selling cloud side by the other things. So if you are deploying a platform, whoever it is at this panel here, you need to make sure that the platform you're deploying can deal with things outside of just deploying stuff on top of a hypervisor, because there's so much more. And currently the cloud is only sitting on 10% of the total revenue. So if you have a cloud platform and a cloud-only platform, well, you're only selling 10% of the potential of the market. So you need to make sure that whatever you're deploying can handle much more than just the virtual server.
Yeah. There's an interesting.
No, go ahead.
There's an interesting aspect to this, though, where it's important, and OpenStack has been fun because it's really had people playing together who don't normally play together. But if you offer a service that only you offer, which is a differentiated advantage, it could actually, in the OpenStack customers I deal with, which are Fortune 500 customers all the way down to startups, right, who are deploying OpenStack internally, looking for hosts who are deploying OpenStack. The reason they do that is because they want workload portability. So one of the things that actually we see is that there are great differentiators that hosting providers offer or software companies offer. Being able to have people translate those workloads between a hosted and an internal site or between two different hosts does actually create competitive differentiation, because those things allow customers to have flexibility and choice.
I don't want my customer going anywhere, right? So once he's with me, I want him stuck. That interoperability makes me scared.
But let's be practical. You're competing with Amazon to an extent, right? And Itlif gave this example yesterday. If you have a customer who wants global scale and you have excellent presence in the UK and the US and none in Asia, the fact that you can collaborate with somebody in Asia actually solves a business problem that allows you to capture that customer, right? And this is the thing that's exciting in OpenStack. We have these conversations. This is part of what's driving people forward.
Well, let me ask Microsoft for a second. Why do I need interoperability? Why can't I just layer everything on top of my Azure platform and forget it?
So
why do I need the rest of these guys?
So, well,
that's a good question, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that we look at to go back to like differentiators, it's not just a deterrent to leaving, but it's also a deterrent to entering.
Correct.
And I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind, right? It's the difference between being master of your domain and your small group of customers versus being able to participate in a broader ecosystem. Now, to answer your question, the way that we look at it is Azure is how Microsoft runs Windows Server. Like that's it. Like we do build like finished services on top of it, but there's not like magic voodoo that only exists inside of Microsoft GFS data centers. It's the same stuff that we ship to other folks. So you know what? Like let's say that you need to serve the German market for data sovereignty issues. Hey, guess what? Those same bits that we run, you can drop into your data center in Germany, and you don't have to deal with any of the concerns about Microsoft being a U.S. held company. What's the thing that Prism? None of that stuff. You don't have to worry about it, right? Go for it. We give you the tools to do for it. It's built on a standard set of APIs. I know that it's based on top of closed source, but it is a standard set of APIs. Party on. Make money. That's our goal.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, interoperability is a very valid point, and I certainly wouldn't argue against it, but there is an awful lot of FUD there as well, I think, in the fact that being able to move from an application from one provider to another, there's 17 different ways to do that, depending on what level you want to move the application, whether you're trying to move images, whether you're trying to move the app itself. And at the end of the day, it's still easier than it used to be when you're in a 3-year fixed contract for a bunch of kit, and you would then have to sign your new contract 6 months before that if you tried to work out moving it over manually. So it's getting easier, not harder, but suddenly it's becoming this hot issue because it's actually getting easier.
Right.
And there's a lot of money to be made in helping customers find business continuity that allows them to have more portability off of your own service. That's actually a high value service.
Right.
So it seems a little bit strange, but when we talk about commoditization of the infrastructure, then that allows you to add premiums on top, and you've created value. Even if the thing that you're not making as much margin on, you're selling less of.
We look at like there being two types of lock-in. Okay, one is like a technology lock-in. Like for example, if I build an application on top of OpenStack or on top of Azure, I'm committing to a set of APIs and a general topology in a way that these things are going to behave inside of the hosted environment. Same way whether it's like Azure or Azure Pack, right? And so the thing is, there's that type of lock-in, but then there's also like a service provider lock-in, which is a much more challenging type of thing where I can only get Neapolitan ice cream from one particular vendor. And I think that is a much scarier proposition, and I think almost everyone on this panel up here is trying to find ways to solve that issue in particular. We all have different approaches to it, but
well, I think they keep switching me off. They don't want me to talk. I think. Well, to that point, I want to come back to the API in a second because I think it's not just about portability. When I think about it from a software perspective, as a technology vendor, I think about the importance of APIs as being able to integrate with third-party tools. Not so much about the portability of, hey, let me take my data from point A to point B, this different hoster. But I think about it more from, it's very, very important for me to be open and future-proofed, frankly, around the fact that I don't know where I want to put my eggs at this point as a host. I'm trying to make my mind. And if something fails, I want to be able to try something else as well. So I think that openness to me is critically important. But let me go back again to this idea of federation for a second here, because you said something interesting that I'm only buying Neapolitan ice cream from one vendor, but I don't think that's necessarily bad, particularly if you're a hoster, right, Tony? I mean, who needs federation? Who needs this concept of going elsewhere?
It's funny, you're saying I can only buy Neapolitan ice cream from one vendor. Isn't that exactly what differentiation is? Because you have to go to that one. Federation and being able to easily move between different vendors, whether it's an open source one or a proprietary one, has got certain benefits. I don't deny that. But the issue for me is if you have a customer that comes along and says, right, well, I want to use this system because I can federate. Okay, so all the different providers I'm going to use, I don't want to use any of their differentiated features and what they do on top because I need to use the lowest common denominator because I can't federate if I then lock myself in. And so what you end up with is getting a whole bunch of customers that are actually deliberately buying a commoditized lowest common denominator service. So to begin with, it might look like a good win, and you get customers. And no doubt, if you're trying to use it to fill up spare capacity and everything else, all good things, but you might well end up with actually pushing yourself more towards a commoditized service than otherwise. I'm quite sure there's several people on here might disagree with me on that point. But
Detlef, do you have anything to say about this? Is it about the lowest common denominator? Is that what the business is about when it comes to federation?
I think it does two things for the industry. I think, as I started saying a while back, we have this big 800-pound gorilla in Amazon sitting in front of us, currently sitting on around 60% of the infrastructure as a service market. We believe at ONAP that it's not the support, God knows it isn't, and it's not the price, because actually it's quite expensive, and it certainly isn't the uptime of Amazon that actually gets them all their business. We think it's the scale, we think it's the geographical reach, and then this cool products that they've built. And I think the only way we as an industry can compete with those three things is if we work together. If the people in this room stop looking at the guy sitting next to you as a competitor, but actually as a source of revenue, as someone who you can work with, and if you have a data center in Austin, and if you have one in London, the two of you now suddenly have data centers in Austin and London. And if you realize that, instead of start competing with each other, but if you realize the only way to compete with Amazon, unless you got the cash to build up 12 data centers, then it's by working together with the other people in this room and federating across it. So yeah, I mean, that's the one point. Another point is that you all sit with like maybe 30 to 40 to maybe more % idle capacity in your data centers. A lot of that stuff is already powered up. It's probably burning capex, it's burning energy. And by allowing other people in this room to tap into it, you can actually monetize that spare capacity.
Where is the starting point practically, if I'm a hoster?
Sorry?
If I'm a hoster and I turn to my right and there's another hoster there, where's the starting point for us? Where do I start?
There's several projects on the way. We work with an open source project called Compatible One. The point is here, a marketplace can't be closed. We have obviously probably the first and the biggest one at ONAP, but it can't be an ONAP project. It's so important because a true marketplace can't be powered by one vendor. So the reason we've gone open source on the whole thing is to make sure that it's already integrated with OpenStack, it's already integrated with the Cloud Stack and the other guys out there. So it's a true federation actually where you can span across, and suddenly portability and interoperability is not a question of the platform. It's a question of this middleware sitting in between, making sure there's one point of entry to all the points of exits.
Well, let me go back to Martin now as a web hoster. What do you believe of this socialization of the entire stack? Who do you want to work with? The hoster next door to you, or do you just think that maybe working with Amazon is a good way to go? Or neither one? You're going down the Neapolitan ice cream road.
It's a hard question. I think for some things it might be different answers depending of what you'll do. There's a lot of things that you can do with leveraging Amazon. There's other things that you could do. Maybe it's all about how you're going to market it, and you're probably not going to market it exactly as how you're going to buy it or implement it. So maybe the way it's implemented or what's behind doesn't matter that much as how you package it, how you market it, and how you sell it to the.
But is there a way to differentiate the way you sell it? I mean, so now I'm moving kind of from I'm crossing up from federations to these hybrid, heterogeneous
part of it. I think
natures. Is there a way to sell different? Are there different courses for different?
For example, when we launched like three years ago, when we launched the smart servers, which is a single VM on a dedicated server. I mean, it's leveraging existing technologies, but marketing it and delivering it in a way that's different, and that is a differentiator. But then it's sure that the market will catch up, and you need to find other things that will allow you to differentiate too.
Are there other technologies beyond just the core ones that we've talked about we touched on storage for a second. I want to go back there in a little bit too, because we've been having a lot of discussions about quality of service lately, and I think there is a difference there in terms of how you're marketing your services and how you want to build them and who you're going after too. So anybody can open up that question. But before we go there, what are the peripheral services that are becoming very, very important as you build a cloud technology? So we've talked about everything below the hypervisor being commoditized. We've talked about orchestration and federation to a degree. What about the peripheral services? Does anything need to change dramatically? I mean, security, billing, monitoring, any kind of management technologies that are very specific to the cloud that you've seen change?
I think that the challenge is that all of those things work together, and when you also have legacy to handle, so it's probably difficult. But one of the thing that as a provider you want to see change is that you want to be able to provide to be able to scale from one service to the other, and from one implementation to another, and you want to be able to move a customer or allow the customer to buy those different services and to manage them at a central point, and have those services being able to interact together and to work together easily.
So that's where the orchestration becomes so critical, presumably.
But Martin, I think there's another important point in this, right? The theme to everything you said is everything has to work together, right? And so automated networking, right? Networking infrastructure that you can automate, that can be part of this, is a serious challenge to work out. And you had asked for a hosting provider, who's the first connection point you should peer with? To me, the answer is real simple. It's not a hosting provider at all. It's your customer, right? The most profitable customers are going to be the ones who already have their own infrastructure, and your peering point with them is with them and what they're doing internally. It'd be helpful to have multiple providers, but if you can have flexibility just with their own infrastructure, then that becomes a really exciting point. And networking, I know for a fact, it's one of the most exciting topics in OpenStack discussions. Networking and automated networking and software-defined networking really is really this hot topic where we have to work together to solve it. Because if I bring up workloads in two different places and want to connect them together, if I can't define the networks in a smart way, in a portable way, in a dynamic way, then that whole thing is going to fall apart, no matter what services I offer on top of
I
it.
totally agree. And we talk about this portability and interoperability. When it boils down to it, those two things have really to do with the networking. They have to do with the storage, finding a way to distribute storage across several locations.
Yeah.
And then obviously the holy grail, finding a way to distribute the databases. And once we got that down, it's not about the APIs or the different platforms. It's about finding a way to actually move stuff around across those two things. And I think that's where it's buried. Because basically, if you take any of the end users of the clients of you guys and you put sort of a 360 view on them, then what are the components they need in order to provide the services? And we've got the compute down, we've sorted out the RAM, and we sorted out, to some extent, the CDN that these guys should be running, and most of them are not. But when it comes to the networking, it's not nearly as automated as the rest of it. There's the guys from Nigeria and other situations like that have done a good job at it. Comes to storage, we're still tied in, most of us, to this large piece of iron sitting in the data centers. It's totally ridiculous. And when it comes to the databases, there are some new and NoSQL routes, but 97% of all databases are still MySQL. And you can try to scale it, but it's really, really hard. And I think that's probably the next steps. That's what we should focus on, I think, as an industry, rather than looking at the stuff sitting directly on top of the hypervisor.
So, I mean, I'm very happy to take it down the technical route. I'd love to get feedback. So if anybody has questions, yeah, please start to think about them, because we'd love to take them. But it strikes me that it continues to be, your drivers should be the business market you're going after, right? Because am I going to really turn around and buy a very expensive SSD? Am I really going to turn around and buy that middleware layer to sort of make my entire network software defined? So I can now manage, as a small hoster, am I really going to start talking to my customer about what he has behind his firewall? I mean, if I've never had the culture of doing that up until this point, do I continue to want to build an inexpensive service and take away, frankly, from my customers, the commoditized area of their business, first and foremost as well,
so one
at
of
a
the
low cost?
One of the interesting things and opportunities around investing and learning something like OpenStack is that if the customer's running it internally and you're running it, then you actually can have a really informed discussion about that, and it can actually build ties and help bring customers in. And I think Microsoft technologies have a very similar footprint, right? If a customer is really comfortable and strong with Microsoft series of technologies, then that makes that conversation, it's an acceptable lock, right, if you will, and it's one of the things that you can use to build relationships, which that's all there is.
There's
In the community, yeah.
There's emotional lock-in too, so maybe.
Emotional lock-in?
Yeah. So
emotional lock-in to your traditional business model.
If you don't lock the customer in, maybe you'll lock in him emotionally.
Yeah.
So
I think
That's what I mean by happy lock-in at the end of the day, is that customers actually they want to build that relationship. They want to be happy using the service. They actually want to feel that they having a service that is differentiated to it suits their business. One of the classic things we see a lot of service providers do, they come to us with their plans to build a cloud platform, and they say, right, we're going to build this thing and we're going to go and try and take on Amazon and everything else. And I'll go, so what do your customers actually want? Have you actually bothered to go and ask them? And they don't know. They think they can somehow go and catch up with Amazon and build this thing and that suits everyone. And it's like, well, no. Pick a really small segment of your customer base, identify what they need, get that out there, roll it out to the market as quickly as you possibly can, and learn from it, whichever technology you're using.
we have a question, and just to that comment, I mean, I was talking with a telecom provider, you wouldn't believe it, massive, a few months ago. And one of the things they did was they're completely in the SMB sector, and they went and bought the most expensive technology on the back end to construct themselves a cloud, best of breed.
We see that a lot,
you seem to be completely out of sync with who your market segment is, right?
Yeah, we see
You're
that a lot
overkilling
as well.
what they need, and how are you going to bring your price points to that level? Did we have a question down there somewhere? Sorry, I thought I saw somebody down that end. Nope. Imagining things. All right, let me jump to a couple of other just interesting questions that I think altogether just liven this up a little bit. What about execution now? All right, we can get back to technology anytime you want, but I think execution is incredibly important, right? And perhaps, from your Dell background there, Rob, you can tell us why people like Dell have pulled out of the cloud space. I mean, I would say the same thing. GoDaddy pulled out of the cloud space. They're not the only ones as well. I think Raging Y pulled out of the cloud business as well. It's not necessarily easy to get right? I mean, is it just because Dell hates cloud, or what is it?
Yeah, and one of the challenges we had in the way that was positioned in the media, Dell, I'll be very simple, Dell actually is in the process of the last couple of months been increasing its investment in cloud. We constantly are doing that. And there's a constant decision for us on how we best focus on those investments and what we're going to make. At the same time that our services group had decided not to try to launch their OpenStack shared infrastructure, right, which is a very specific type of dedicated, rent a VM, Amazon style. We had greatly invested more in our private cloud, managed private cloud, where we're helping customers bring up infrastructure on their sites. So it's a balanced investment, and you're entirely right. It's about where you want to execute, where you want to be able to deliver your service, and a lot of cases for us, it's about where our customers are talking to us, right? We have a lot of customers who are talking to us about wanting to stand up infrastructure in their site that's compatible with public cloud infrastructure. Much fewer of those are interested in buying end-to-end services from Dell that includes public cloud. They want to have choice in how those things are offered, and that's a really important point. And a lot of Dell's customers are offering those services, so it's clearer in the market when we help customers bring up a cloud internally and then work with our other customers to help them connect with those customers. A lot of customers involved, right. Which is normal for a big company like Dell.
So I mean, it goes without saying that execution is important, but you brought up another interesting point now about the difference between public cloud infrastructure and private cloud infrastructure. And again, so which one am I going after as a host, and what does that mean to me? Am I suddenly got a differentiated SLA, a different architecture in place because of it?
And I almost regret bringing in the terms. When I talk to the end users,
hates cloud too, so
the end users, customers, they don't care. They just have workloads, right? They develop in shared infrastructure. They bring it back into private infrastructure. They want to burst into data centers that are geolocated near where their customers are. Those distinctions don't necessarily help us interact with customers.
No, and you're absolutely right, because the problem as well is we say public cloud, and when we say public cloud, most people think Amazon. But there's a million different ways, as we talked about, ways to differentiate the public cloud, whether it's the SSDs or the infrastructure or the capabilities of it. And actually, as far as service providers should be concerned, they might well have 6 different flavors of cloud services they offer, depending on the customer type and what they're wanting to do, how private they're wanting to do it, whether they want their own complete stack in their own racks and under lock and key and nobody else gets to use it, or they want to boot a VM up by the hour. There's different solutions for different types of customers.
And they might even want to mix and match those capabilities based on their...
Absolutely.
I think that's a huge differentiator, right? I mean, when you look at, for example, what Microsoft does in Azure, the probability that we're going to stand up racks of servers for a given tenant, unless it's a really, 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 really big tenant, it's pretty slim, right? So I think that's actually a huge opportunity for differentiation, where you have your multi-tenant cloud. We won't use public cloud. You have a multi-tenant cloud, and then you have a single tenant cloud. And I guess the other thing that I would ask is, if this is a business that you're going to pursue, then the tooling that you're going to need to manage a large number of single tenant clouds is somewhat different than a lot of the tooling that exists today for managing a single or a small number of multi-tenant clouds.
I actually think Dell totally got it. I think it was a bold and brave move, realizing that, this is not what it's about anymore. Who want to go build a public cloud based on some commodity stuff with another commodity layer sitting on top of it? That's not what it's about. In order to actually get further, you need to think about the stuff sitting on top of the cloud. And Dell is in this unique situation, and they're already talking to all the people that has all the hardware and all the commodity stuff sitting there. So their chance is now to go and talk and use those relationships, and that's because Dell is slowly transforming into a software business now, and take all the stuff, all the new acquisitions they've done, and add them on top of the existing channels they're working with. I think they totally got it. It was a brave move too, but I think
so
it was
VMware don't get it then?
Sorry?
So VMware don't get it, and Microsoft don't get it in launching.
VMware is suddenly actually doing pretty much the same thing. Yeah, they're starting out by building a small thing on their own, but what they really want is to hybrid with all the other clients and channels that they're working with. So they're doing it pretty much the same thing, but doing it with a little start initially. Sorry?
Trying to federate it.
Trying to federate, yeah.
Exactly. VMware get it to a degree, but they don't know how service providers think. They know how enterprises think, and they probably know how enterprises think for virtualization workloads better than anybody. But service providers, I think we can all agree, think in a very different way in how they want to do things. And I don't think that they get that yet. If anyone from VMware in the audience wants to come and disagree with me, then go right ahead.
Who is it that owns most of, what company is it that owns a big chunk of VMware?
EMC.
Yeah, so, I mean, conjecture, but I wonder if maybe they have the software stack to drive adoption of a large incumbent storage business. I think that's changing over time. I think it's going to have to change over time as we better virtualize the storage stacks, but something to maybe consider.
VMware definitely captured the early virtualization market with a very storage integrated solution, and we definitely see Amazon sort of knocked that pin over for us. And Amazon did a huge service to the industry and the development patterns in cloud by saying, you know what, VMs are ethereal and they might not be up all the time, and by having a bad SLA, they actually introduced a whole new range of development and DevOps and all these capabilities that are really going to change the market, in my opinion. I think when you come back to execution, you know, if you're not following what's going on in DevOps because you don't think it applies to you, you're wrong. You will be hit by DevOps because it is a huge phenomenon that's driving Amazon. And they've really helped break VMware's lock on what it means to have, you know, up infrastructure that stays up all the time.
Yeah. Yes, please.
You talk about execution, about GoDaddy getting out of the cloud business, but it's also about expertise. And if you look at GoDaddy, they probably did not have the expertise to answer calls about what's going on the server, in the shell, and the comments or the kernel crashed and things like that. But
I agree. They didn't have an adequate monitoring management.
It's not
I mean,
no, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. They probably didn't have the expertise, but it's also about the customer base. Just because someone buys a domain name doesn't mean that they actually want a VPS. A lot of people successfully sell these things together, but it doesn't mean the skill sets for the customers are the same. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
About the customer and the expertise inside, I mean, you need to think about the expertise you have or you can get before choosing, for example, one of your solutions, or before you choose an app or OpenStack. And what is your expertise? What expertise you can get? What expertise you can afford? And then you choose what better fits your profile. And sure, you need to think about what's your target market and what kind of cloud will appeal to your target market.
Well, then what was, so let me ask you guys this, then what was IBM thinking in buying SoftLayer? Were they trying to go after private cloud?
But you talked about execution. I think if we want an example,
surely they don't know how to execute.
Someone that executed well, I think SoftLayer really executed well, and SoftLayer has a platform that surely appeals to
When you say execute well, because they have a degree of automation that IBM couldn't do inexpensively, or because I don't know, I'm just leaving it
I think it was for them an expensive shortcut for doing a lot of things, and I hope that the SoftLayer influence does bleed into IBM rather than the other way around. But the really interesting thing for me in that is, my understanding is SoftLayer is mainly an SMB type business in terms of their end customers. IBM is very not SMB, it's all enterprise, so I'm curious to see how that mix works as well and how they cope with it.
Why couldn't IBM get there? I mean, you can say cost, but surely they had the technology.
Well, my understanding is IBM had literally hundreds and hundreds of staff working on their cloud technology. So yeah, it's a really good question. I think a lot of it is that it doesn't matter how many people you throw at a problem like this, it's time and experience that you need to actually be able to deliver the end solution. Throwing 100 engineers at something is not going to get you something 100 times faster than throwing one engineer on the problem. There does reach a point when you just can't get there any faster.
Mythical man-month type problem.
Yeah.
But isn't it funny how overnight it became a platform discussion again? When after SoftLayer was sold to IBM, what does that mean to OpenStack? What does it mean to CloudStack stuff they're running in there? What does it mean to their own stuff? The point is, it doesn't matter. I actually agree with Tony around it. It was all about getting access to the SMB market, getting access to these great executors that Lance and his teams have managed to put together. And to be able to make a leap into a market that they on their own, no matter how many billions they put into it, just wouldn't have a chance at reaching. I think it was a touch of billions from IBM's side.
But at the same time, IBM is a major contributor in the OpenStack arena, and they have a lot of developers working on that. And we've seen a lot of providers, switch their development efforts, stop trying to do an internal work because they felt they could leverage things like that. So those decisions, I think, and this is the point, are really driven based on customer penetration in markets that you can grab and things like that.
I wouldn't be surprised if Lance is CEO of IBM someday. You're laughing now. I'm just waiting.
Well, 5 years' time, I'll come back to you on that one. Yeah. So let me ask my last question, because one of the things, and it's the last day of HostingCon, but I haven't heard a lot of discussion about, but one of the things I see that, and it does relate to the architecture quite a bit in terms of building a cloud, because building a cloud can relate to anything, the people, the operations, the processes, the marketing, as we've discussed as well. But from a packaging up perspective, I think it really matters, because one of the weaknesses I feel like I've seen in the hosting market, and certainly from a monitoring perspective, we see this fairly often where guys have one vanilla product that they're selling, a couple of variations of it, but it's really just one. And I see a bit of struggle, but a known struggle. I feel like a lot of hosters actually know that they do want to start packaging things up and having multiple offerings as well, to get out of that simply that Amazon-esque emulation stage where I'm just trying to sell raw resources. I need to do something differently, to that point of offering up services. How do I package these things up? Because I've often found that it seems very difficult, even from a monitoring perspective, where I can say simply, listen, you can slap on 3 variations of monitoring. You can monitor the infrastructure layer, at the services layer, at a more granular layer, at a more voluminous layer, with different SLAs, and then you can start slapping on security, performance, quality of service on it, and so on and so forth. I see that as problematic, and I'm wondering how you address it from the architectural perspective.
Part of the challenge I've seen is a lot of hosters, certainly not all of them, but a lot of hosters traditionally weren't very good at solution selling. They were good at, okay, so you want to host your website, right? Well, how much web space, how much bandwidth, et cetera, do you need? How fast do you want your server to be? And that's about it. And actually trying to upsell all these added value services wasn't that easy. But these days, you've got all this internal IT moving out to the cloud. And actually, that's exactly what the customers want. They want you to be able to turn around and be the new IT help desk for them and deliver the entire range of services. Their IT help desk may not want that, but the end users in the organizations, that's exactly what they want.
I think the problem is, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just going to say, and that's a real mindset change. That's not a technological change. That's really a business mindset change, and actually, how do we go about doing this?
I think in a perfect world, you have a platform that is packaged. You can build perceived value around it and offer it to one client base over here, another client base over here, and essentially run on the same infrastructure, the same data centers, the same servers, the same switches, the same orchestration platform, but have 1,000 different offerings. I think that's the magic point. That's what you need to be looking for. And I think the problem is that a lot of companies still, for some reason, think this cloud is the magic bullet, and all they need to do is just launch another cloud service, and then clients will come rolling in. That was probably how it was when I started VPS.net back in the days. God knows, it was fantastic days.
The cloud,
but it just
it's not big enough.
It's not how it goes anymore. Right. It's not about the cloud. It's about being able to find, as someone said, I think it was you, Rob, who said before, workloads don't care about the cloud. They just want to work. So you need to find a way where they work best.
Execution environment, right?
Totally, right? And having a platform that only allows you to execute in one place is ending you up as a one-trick pony and very fast and no-trick pony. Because that place will be commoditized overnight unless you have a way more open and sort of encompassing approach to it.
So from an OpenStack and Microsoft perspective, Azure perspective, I think we're going to have to roll to the final sort of words here, but in terms of, I feel like there are 2 different approaches to building those services. Right? I mean,
I would actually suspect we would give a very similar answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like whether or not you can read the source to the project, I think is a very small component of the overall things. It's funny how many times we've agreed and we've never met or spoke before. So,
the one thing that I think is important, and there is an open source element to this, but it's not it doesn't require open source. It's humility and collaboration. So, right, you were asking which customers, which things to do. The thing that's really been remarkable to me in working with these open source communities is that people don't show up with tablets of their feature set, right? They show up with ideas, with conversations, with collaboration. And so The thing that I have found in our go-to-market with our OpenStack solutions and our other solutions too, is that when we are collaborative with our customers, when we're open with them, when we listen to what they want to do and don't say, this is how to do it because we're the experts, but we actually work with them and find out what their expertise is, that has been the powerful thing. That's been the message.
Well, I think what, what I find is that the community is driven by use cases, very specifically within OpenStack. And I think that's very appreciable.
But it's also driven by people and relationships, right? And that's the thing that's easy to forget, right? When you want to emulate Amazon or something like that, it's driven by working with your customers around your expertise and their expertise.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, I'm giving you a hard time.
No, I mean,
You guys drive the market. You tell everybody where does it need to go?
I think that may be a perception issue that maybe we need to work on. Because when, for example, the stuff that my team works on, we talked to customers for 2 years while we were building the product. We released V1. We had 9 months to release V2. We didn't get to talk as much, but I've run into dozens of people here at this conference that I know that I talk to every other week to understand not just technically what's going on with their operations, but what's going on with their business and with their customers. And one of the benefits, working with Microsoft and partnering with Microsoft is we do have a major footprint inside of enterprise accounts, right? So we do have a pretty good understanding of what a lot of the largest consumers of IT services want. And so that does very, very strongly influence what we build. Now, at the same time, you're exactly right in that when we build a solution and we get a call from someone in the Fortune 500, a lot of times they do ask us, how should I deploy this? And I think that's what leads to the bullet list of features along with the prescriptive documentation. So
the thing is, just from a hoster perspective, that these hosters, you guys, if you haven't launched the cloud right now, then you don't have time to sit down with OpenStack and say, this is interesting, let's discuss, let's collaborate, let's find a way to build new business cases. And they just need to get online because they're losing clients every single day to Amazon. There's not time for this stuff. And it's not a case of building a project plan with milestones and next year deployments and so on and so on. They need to get online today or tomorrow at the latest. Because it's not about the cloud. I've been saying that all along, but cloud is still the entry ticket. Without that, you can't build the stuff on top of it that will actually make you win.
I agree, and I agree with a lot of your comments about the workloads don't know the cloud, and I don't know what this cloud thing is you speak of, but and to the Azure point too. Last year we had Press Association that ran the Olympics in London, and they actually used Azure, and they actually did want prescriptive technology and prescriptive solutions very rapidly. They didn't want to futz around with trying to figure out how to build this thing. They just said get it out there, and then we did gave them the management tools, and it worked very, very well. And so I think that's what more and more enterprises are doing. To Tony's point about this consumption of IT, give it to me now, make the damn thing work. And to the degree that I expect to perform. Last word from iWeb here, our friends here on building a cloud. Any last minute suggestions for everyone who's walking out of here saying, I've got to get to that next level of service and evolve?
Maybe don't try to build everything yourself, but build on top. Or I think when you look at, for example, SoftLayer, they integrated a lot of technologies that existed or product that did things, and they built on top of it and built something that made all this work together. And so I think and make sure you have the expertise, and that we need to go fast, and that's one of the challenges. I think that one of the biggest challenges is moving fast. So try to find the solutions that the elements that will allow you to move fast.
All right, thanks very much, everybody, and thanks for the audience too, being with us here today. Thanks, everyone.